Let us have a small look at this part 4 of assignment 2, because here you're going to count k-mares using this KMC software. Yeah. In module 6 we actually use this software, so let me go to the module 6 document, and this is the section I'm talking about. K-mare counting on Orion. Here you can see the basic use of KMC. And what I would like to highlight a little bit here now is this part here of this shell script. It says below here, it's explained a little bit here, but I would like to make you understand what is actually going on in these two lines of code. And what are we actually doing here? Echo $R1, and then you have this operator here, which we call a redirect. So let me show you here in the terminal window. I have logged in here in the terminal window, and let me now just create two variables, R1, R2. R1 equals, and these are supposed to be the file names, right, of the R1 and R2 Illumina files. I just call them something like this, my file r1.fasta or fastq. Yeah, it doesn't matter, it's just some names, right? Like that. And then R2 is some other file name, and I use the same recipe. Of course, you have different file names than this, right? I just make this as examples. These are now two shell variables that are existing in my sort of shell memory. And when you write echo and a variable like this, let me just copy that and paste it in here with the right clicking on my. If you write echo dollar and the name of an existing shell variable, it will just print its content, right? Print its content. So this is something you can always do if you have a shell variable. It must be an existing variable, right? This is also has some content. If I try to just do something like this, it's nothing, right? Because there is no X variable existing here. If you want to, for instance, look at the scratch, that's a variable, right? $scratch. Scratch is an existing variable. Here you can actually see the content of that. It's also a small text only, right? It's an alias you can think of, right? But back to my file names here. What are we actually doing in this line, the first line of code here? Yeah, if you ignore this folder name, if I replace or if I just copy that R1 and then I use this right arrow sort of into files.txt, what happens then? Well, this one we saw above, this part here of the code will just print something, the content of that R1 variable. And this will then redirect, as we say, whatever is on the left hand side here into a file. And here I specify what name I should give this file. So actually before I run this now, let me list the content of my folder here. I'm still in my assignment 2 folder, and here you can see the files. I have this fastp shell script, I have the container for fastp, and I have this R markdown and the corresponding HTML file. These are the 4 files. Now if I do as I started to do up here, I type R1 and redirect into files.txt. Nothing is output, but if I now list the content again, you will see I have now gotten a file here named files.txt. And if I look into that file, and I can do that by cat, then you just look into and print the content of this file. You can see that the text has now been, that was out, the text that this command outputs has now been put into this file here. So this has now become a text file. And notice you use echo to look into a variable, use cat to look into a file. A shell variable and a file are two completely different things, right? So what is done in the second here? It's almost the same thing, but notice this redirect is slightly different. It's two of these right hand sort of pointers or arrows, or what you like to call them, like this. And I use this file name again. So if I run this one now and then again look at the content of my file, you will see that the first content is still there, and now this second, the output of running this, as we saw up here, produces this file name, right? It's now been added. And that's the difference between using a single and a double right arrow here, is that when you use a single arrow, you create the file or you overwrite what is there. If you use the double arrow, you just add to the existing file. So let me demonstrate this. If I now repeat the here but forgot to do the double, it still works. What would happen to my file? You can see the first content is now gone, replaced by the second one. Replaced by the second one. So if you go back here again, we see that, okay, we take the R1 file name and put into this file, and then we take the R2 file name and add to this file. And this file is used below here as input to this KMC software. Because the KMC software we need to input two files, right? The R1 and R2 file should be input to KMC, but you cannot input sort of two files to this software. But instead you put them, the names of the files, into a third file, and this one you input. Yeah, it's a little bit a strange solution, I would say, because most softwares will handle multiple inputs, but not this one. The point to show, or at least one important point of showing this now, is that when you use the raw data, you have an R1 and an R2 file as input, and then you can use the code just as it is here by just replacing the names of the files up here. So R1 and R2 contain different names, and this will still work the same. However, in the pre-processed data, you also have a third file, right? You have this unpaired file in addition. And that one you should also have here. And that means that you just copy this line here, copy in below here, and say that you echo the unpaired and add that as well as a third file name to this files.txt, right? Can you see that? So if I had an unpaired, a variable called unpaired here, let's say it looked something like this. So if I echo $unpaired, I just get this file name here. And then I can echo this and add it to these files as well. If I did the previous as I should, right? So then you have R1 file name, R2 file name, unpaired file name in this small file here. And then you give it as input here. But learn about this redirects. This was actually part of the Unix small Unix course in module 5. If you go back there and look, you will see that this has been mentioned already there. But now you are familiar with this.